Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. In a world filled with screens and distractions, we invite you to reconnect with the natural world around you. Welcome to Nature Bound, a podcast dedicated to unpacking the intrinsic bond between humans and nature. We'll uncover the benefits of spending time outdoors, including how a nature-centric lifestyle can improve your mental health, elevate your leadership skills, and unleash your creativity. And now here's your host, outdoor enthusiast, and renowned author of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock, Emmanuel Rose.
Well, thanks for tuning in today to the Nature Bound podcast. I have two very experienced outdoorsmen who spend time all during the year catching, cooking, and experiencing being outside. And today we're going to be talking about the spring turkey hunt and how the season went. And I want to welcome Mark Avolio and Jim Clark. And thanks, guys, for taking time to share some of your experiences and your wisdom, if we can dig some of that out. To get started, love to have you just talk about a little bit about when you started turkey hunting and why you started turkey hunting. And we'll start with Mark because his last name starts with an A.
Well, I didn't start seriously turkey hunting till about I want to say maybe 10 years ago. It just wasn't something that was on my radar. Usually that time of year I was fishing for salmon and steelhead and so on, but that kind of petered out and looking for something else to do. And turkey hunting filled the gap, and it's become a real passion.
Jimmy, what about you, Jim?
Oh, you bet. Yeah, so I actually started quite a long time ago. It would have been 1985 when I was in grad school down in Southern Illinois, and I knew my passion was always bow hunting from a hunting standpoint, which is in the fall. And I just knew that if I ever started turkey hunting, I would become addicted to it. Just based on everything that I read, I just knew I'd really enjoy it. But I had so many other priorities at that time, like grad school and girlfriends and all these things. But they instituted a season in Illinois. It was actually a draw, and I applied and got a tag for the third season, and I went. And I was not successful the first year, but as I predicted, I fell in love with it. So that was 1985, right? So you're talking about 39 years, long time.
Wow, that is a long time. And you've hunted turkeys all over, not just where you live in Oregon right now, right?
Correct, right? Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, so hunted all throughout the Midwest. From Minnesota all the way through Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, and then we lived in South Carolina, hunted there, and Kansas, and then California, Oregon. So quite a few states, actually. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I want to dig into what were some of the seminal or key moments from 2024, what you noticed, observed, assessed, experienced from this spring that was maybe a standout event. Mark, what do you got?
Well, for me first, I probably to qualify everything I'm about to say, I'm not hunting what I call agricultural birds. I'm hunting what I call free-range turkeys. I'm out in the national forest and doing the classic running and gunning. And probably for this year, and so there's no, kind of know where they're going to be, but it's not like, to tell you the truth, for the 10 years I've been hunting this one area, I still don't know where the roosting trees are. Never been able to find them. So, but, there's 500,000 acres. So at any rate, in fact, I put them to bed and thought I put them to bed in terms of left them at 4 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and come back first light the next day. They're nowhere to be found. So I have no idea. But that said, as far as this year is concerned, I kind of look for patterns to repeat, and I thought this year was going to be somewhat like the 2016 season, where we had a relatively mild winter, except for about a week or so. The snowpack wasn't that low, although what there was of it was fairly deep, above about 4,000 feet, because I'm hunting up to almost 6,000 feet where I'm at. And I was looking for the repeat of 2016, where it was warm. The birds, the hens had already nested, and in fact, we're seeing poults almost by the end of April. And I was looking for the toms to be out and looking for love, so to speak, and they weren't. Got cold, got wet, and the turkeys were still flocked up for where I was hunting at the beginning of the year, so beginning of the season. So that was kind of a like, okay, well, let's figure out how to hunt them in flocks, because normally they're not in flocks. They're already gobbling and paired up and so on. So that was my first impression of the 2024 season.
Interesting to build on that, Mark, is that I've had the exact opposite experience in that. As you know, I've been hunting a couple 1,000-acre piece of private ground for a number of years, in addition to public land that we hunt. And on this private ground, I know exactly which trees the turkeys roost on, right? Like literally the trees, and we have them named, right? And so there's basically 3 roosting areas on this property of a couple 1,000 acres where they traditionally have always roosted. The interesting thing was it was logged last year, and the landowner selective harvested substantially all of the large fir trees that the turkeys roost in. And so it was curious what's going to happen. Like what's it going to be like hunting out there with all of these large roost trees taken down? The interesting thing was that the turkeys returned to the area because the habitat is so good, but they didn't know where to go. They didn't know where to roost. So the interesting thing this year was they were in a different area every evening trying to figure out what the right combination of characteristics were to roost in. And so it was like hunting a whole new piece of property after hunting the exact same place for 15 years. So it was interesting, a lot of learning.
So they were coming back into the food plots essentially that you're used to seeing them in. Is that
well, it's not agriculture. It's similar to Mark's. These are free range, turkeys up at 2,500 feet, but they the same general areas where they feed, meadows, oaks, that type of thing. They were coming back to that area, but they just didn't know where to roost because they look up and the trees were gone. And so they were figuring out how to roost in ponderosas or in smaller oak trees. And so they were confused. And it made them actually a little more difficult to hunt because they didn't follow the same patterns, obviously, but it also made it fun.
So it sounds there's a migratory nature to these animals. And do you have any idea about how big that range is that they migrate through?
Well, I'll let Mark take that one first because I think he hunts bigger, more open public ground, and then I'll comment on this. Yeah.
Yeah, the areas I hunt range anywhere from 1,800 feet to above 5,000 feet, and the trick is to find out. The turkeys start off down in the river bottoms because that's where they winter over at, and kind of tongue in cheek. I actually do know where some roosting trees are, particularly early in the season, but they're in town and they frown on that. So anyhow, so it's kind of interesting. I try to find patterns, at least in terms of locating birds and so on. And one of the things I've noticed in this area is if I can find what elevation the elk are at, that's about the same elevation that the turkeys will be at. But I've seen them, I've seen them, up in the snow sometimes too. So that's not a hard and fast rule, but in terms of finding them, you just go up in elevation and look for where it starts to green up. And I think, no biologist, I think what happens is as the turkeys move up in elevation, the hens peel off and find ideal nesting cover. And that gets the toms to stick with them at certain elevations. But well, Manny, we've hunted together. You saw we were finding turkeys at 2,500 feet, and we were watching them cross the road at 5,000 feet in the same week. So,
Yeah.
Some of it has to do with finding them at elevation, but these areas that I hunt, and maybe I'm jumping ahead in some of the questions you have, I look for perennial water. I mean, it's kind of three things I look for in terms of, but it's got to be, again, up some at some elevation. But I look for perennial water sources, flat ground, and and also ideally jack pine areas bordering these somewhat open meadows on flat ground. If you can find those three, it's kind of like the chucker mantra. It's that's what I look for. But you've got to go up in elevation to find them, because I know for a fact that they'll abandon some of the lower areas you find them in to start with.
Jim, what are you seeing as far as the migration patterns?
Yeah, so similar to Mark's area, they do move in elevation, but the difference in elevation where I hunt is much less. So in the lower agricultural areas, which is down closer to the Columbia River, you're talking about elevation of about 800 to 1,200 feet. And that's where the agricultural fields are, and it's lower country, so that's where they spend the winter. Easy food and cover, and then they migrate up into the area that we hunt in the spring. So it's about 2,500 feet elevation. So they still move up in elevation. But in terms of the distance, that distance is approximately 3 to 4 miles that they actually migrate. If you were looking at horizontal movement, it's about 3 to 4 miles to where they winter.
Yeah, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to guess, add a little bit to Jim's comment in distance, we're as much as 20 miles up from the river bottom and up on top, where we'll find birds once the snow is melted and you can get up there. Because what happens is in the wintertime, the river bottom's full of turkeys, and somewhere around about the first part of April, the flock starts getting smaller and smaller to the point where could be 500 turkeys down in the creek bottom where we're camped, and by the end of April, there's no birds left.
Yeah, interesting. How would you characterize the number of birds that you saw this year?
Me, off the charts. I thought there was birds everywhere. I mean, there was just birds. I was seeing them in big flocks, multiple flocks. Although that's not necessarily ideal in terms of hunting them. It's hard to get a tom to peel off when he's got 3 hens with him. But there's a lot. Scale of 1 to 10, I'd say this year is pretty close to a 10 in terms of number of birds from all the years I've been hunting these areas.
Yeah, in our area, we because of the logging, I'm assuming we had about half the birds. Half the toms. We saw about half the hens, and by the way, we saw very few jakes. Normally, we'll see small groups of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 jakes, and we did not see that this year, which is not a particularly good sign. And I don't know how much it has to do with the logging, but the logging was fairly extensive.
Sure.
To counter, but to add again to your comment, we had a ton of jakes this year. In fact, it was hard to find a longbeard this year.
That's a healthy flock.
So it is. It was, and I mean flocks of jakes. I mean, I think one flock we saw around about the first or second week in May must have had 15 jakes in it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Let's see. Did you guys trial or test or put in any new gear into the hunts this year?
I actually did, as I mentioned to you earlier. I have never really been a proponent of optics on a shotgun because I've seen things go bad. When in the old days, when people would actually put a scope on a shotgun and try to shoot a turkey through a 4-power scope because it couldn't find it in the scope. And I've shot plenty of turkeys just using open sights. But I had some eye surgery, and that changed the dynamic. So I actually went with and mounted a Leupold Delta Point Pro red dot reflex sight on my shotgun, And I believe it was a total game changer, not just for me, but for, I take a lot of young people hunting, people that are inexperienced and, lining up the beads of a shotgun. So they tend to shoot over turkeys. And I had a couple people do that this year, shoot over top of them. I would equip them all with a red dot type sight, a zero magnification red dot sight, because you just put that red dot on the turkey's neck, it's done.
Yeah,
it's deadly, and it's much more humane it makes a really good clean kill. So that was a game changer for me. I went from not being a proponent to now I'm an advocate, because I think it's a better solution, especially for new hunters or poor sighted hunters like me.
To add to Jim's comment there too, I have been, or if you switch over to me in terms of new stuff, I went and dropped down to a 20 gauge shotgun this year. I got tired of lugging around 8 or 9 or whatever pound shotgun it was. Still using 3-inch Magnum, 3-inch loads on the 20 gauge, but it's a heck of a lot easier and nicer to carry. And as far as optics, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago, I forget how long ago it was, I went from open sights to a red dot sight, no magnification again. And I did that because I found myself kind of in a pickle, because I hunt alone a lot, and it's hard to call, even mouth call, and stay still and be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what the turkeys are doing if your head's down on the shotgun. Because like as Jim alluded to, if your head's not down on the shotgun, you're going to shoot high. It's just that simple. And it's hard to have your head flat down on a shotgun, focused, not moving, and trying to call and watch what's going on with the turkeys. It's just virtually. The nice thing with the red dot is you don't have to have your head down on the shotgun, and wherever that dot is where the shot's going to go. And that's a big plus for me when I'm hunting alone all the time.
Yeah, good point.
Wow. Any other gear? Yeah, go ahead.
I also this year, I kind of had done it the year before and had been slowly adjusting the kit, so to speak. I had been going to shooting sticks, bipod shooting sticks. Now I've got a nice setup. It's attached to the shotgun. And again, I hunt by myself most of the time, and so it's much easier for me. So the gun is always up and ready. And with the red dot, there's no, because I have seen turkeys shy away from just simply tightening my grip on the shotgun at 50 yards. So maybe I did something else too, but it's just imperative you say absolutely still. And so I'm trying to add things again as I'm shooting, but calling and hunting by myself that just absolutely minimizes any kind of movement I have to make.
I mean, that's the turkey superpower, right? Is vision.
Oh, that's just,
without doubt.
Without a doubt. Thank God they can't smell her. You never get one. For God's sakes, we had to always make sure you were downwind. You'd never get one. It's just that simple.
Yeah. Well, I had a memorable hunt with Mark this year where I got to see the full show, the full strut, the spitting and scratching, and it really it was like 15 minutes of a National Geographic show, and fortunately I was able to get that bird. But I was at that moment, I was like, I don't even care if I take this bird home or not. It was such an amazing experience to see that animal in full strut and doing what turkeys do. So it was my memorable takeaway from this season. And I wonder if you guys would just share one memorable takeaway that you had from this year.
Mark probably has lots, because he put a lot of time in the ground. You probably have to sort through. We probably have to sort through a bunch. I didn't hunt quite as much this year, but one memorable thing I would say that it reinforced a lesson I've learned previously is, when there's when a turkey is roosted in an area where you've tried to approach them on the roost and you've been unsuccessful for a period of time. And this was actually a prior year. This was public land. This was a prior year. I was unsuccessful in approaching a turkey roost in this area. Just could never quite get around correctly for a shot off the roost. And this year I said, okay, I roosted that bird the night before. I'm like, I'm not going to go in at daylight. I know exactly where he is. I know he's going to fly down. I know he's going to be with hens, and I know I'm going to not get him on fly down. So I purposefully went in at 9:00. I just slept in, had coffee, and then I eased in at about 9, and I went to a meadow above his roost, and I just sat down and I listened. I called a little bit, called in a couple hens, and I'm like, okay, he's probably off with the hen. So I did a big loop because I wanted to be in that spot at 11:00 because they're typically done with their morning activities at about 11 with whoever they were with. I did a big loop, came back to that same field at 11:00, made a call, and he gobbled. And 15 minutes later, I had him on the ground. And the story, the learning was, don't try to force it. If you're don't try to overpower the turkey with trying to push a situation which isn't ideal. Just change the paradigm. Yeah. And that's what I did. And I found that can work very effectively if you just get yourself out of the mindset of, I got to try to get him off the roost. Say, no, I'm not going to get him off the roost because of the way it's situated. Get him later in the morning when he comes back to that area.
And I mean, that right there is the turkey hunting PhD, because you've taken into account all the activities and biological needs that turkey's doing in order to be at the spot where he wants to be at 11. So that's a whole nother episode, Jim.
It made that particular turkey very satisfying because of using all that prior knowledge and of what he's going to be doing his morning, how is he going to spend his time, and knowing where to be when, and then having him actually come in and do that. And then it was very light calling. It was not a heavy call. It was just a light purring and clucking, and bam.
Nice.
Yeah. What you got, Mark? You have lots. What was the big takeaway?
Yeah, well, I have to confess now that I'm essentially a turkey bum, because I hunt the whole season. I take the travel trailer, park it, and hunt for 6 weeks. If we have the time, I sort of got two. One, we'll start with the second thing that happened, is I was stunned that there were still small flocks of hens without toms at the end of the season. In fact, I called in a couple of times. I called hens in with no toms. I mean, 2 and 3 at a time. In fact, I had one time where I struck a bird and the hens came in. There's 3 hens, and I'm sitting there, and this took like 45 minutes, an hour, something like this. And I'm not moving. I'm thinking maybe eventually the tom will come sneaking in with the hens. Never came in. He'd ever gobble every so often. So 3 hens come in. They bed down by the decoys and sit there for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. Get up. They start to saunter off, and they're starting to leave. And I'm thinking, okay, fine, I can relocate or do something. I start to get up. Unfortunately, I was very well concealed. They come back, and 3 left, and 4 hens came back.
Wow.
And then they sat down next to the decoys for a while and kept calling to the decoys, wanting them to come join them and stuff like that. So that was just kind of an odd duck situation. But that happened several times this season.
Nice.
Now, the other one, in terms of actually getting a bird, is when one area we struck, there was a couple of different birds calling that day, and we finally got one to start coming in. And you try and set up so the birds can clearly see the decoys coming in, let the decoys do the work. And the bird couldn't quite see the decoys. A bad setup, but I wanted to make sure when we did set up, I didn't bump the bird, because if you bump and they go silent, you're done for 5 or 6 hours with that bird. They're just not, they might come in again, but they're not going to come in strutting. They're not going to come in gobbling. That said, the bird came in, didn't see the decoys. I couldn't see him. It's just, like I said, a poor setup on my part. But again, I was trying to be cautious. He moved away. We relocated, struck the exact same bird. Thank God he carried binoculars, because we could see him out in an opening. And Colin struck him again, did another setup, much better setup, and he came in. And I think it took, from the time we first struck that bird to the time we had him on the ground, might have been close to 3 hours. Same bird.
Wow.
So
persistence.
Persistent.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, and I'm always torn with this. And Jim, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. As I'm always torn with closing the distance and being aggressive, which, kind of tongue in cheek, that's the old spot and spook kind of arrangement, or hold back and just do some soft calling and hope they see the decoys and let the decoys do the work. I don't know. I've been about 50%. You get aggressive, you get bump the bird. You don't get aggressive, he kind of never comes in and kind of wanders off. So I don't know. But the memorable part was it didn't bump the bird. We took our care and stayed with him.
All right, I love it. Well, just to wrap it up this on this episode, I just love to hear from you what kind of advice you'd give to a beginning or novice turkey hunter based on what you experienced in 2024.
Well, there'd be a lot of advice to give that starts with good scouting and reading as much as you can, and a lot of good information on YouTube. So I won't go over ground that's probably covered in many different ways. One piece of advice I would give a new turkey hunter, any turkey hunter, is go every day you can. Don't wait for the perfect weather. You can kill just as many turkeys on a windy day as you can on a perfectly sunny day. The way in which you kill them might be different. The way you hunt them will be a little different in terms of how loud you call, how often you call, but go every single day because you'll learn and you'll increase your chances. Persistence.
Yeah. Mark?
I want to echo what Jim said in the sense that just get out there and get after it. The cliche is your odds of getting a bird go up dramatically if you get out of the truck. And, go out there, spend the time. If you're not, and it's the other thing, and again, I hunt big, wide areas. I mean, like some days I'll try 10, 15 different spots if I can get away with it in terms of the amount of daylight. If they're, and that's the other thing, it's kind of like, for me anyway, too, maybe a more of a pro tip is that it's kind of, to me, it's like fly fishing. It just boggles my mind to see people stand in one spot and keep flogging the same piece of water and not catching a fish. It's like, you've got miles and miles of river. Keep moving, keep trying, in the turkey vernacular, run and gun. If you're not there, try there. Don't sit there and keep calling and hope one comes in from Illinois or something like that. Move and strike birds. Look for them. And again, as I said, part of that is understanding the habitat and what they're looking for. And I'll leave one last thing on that, and that is that you've got, at least areas I hunt, it's up in the Blue Mountains. Blue Mountains are essentially a desert if it wasn't for snowpack. So you've got to find perennial water. Those hens have to nest on perennial water. They're just like ruffed grouse. And that is, I don't think I've shot a turkey or a ruffed grouse more than 300 yards from perennial water, period. It's just that simple. And if you don't have perennial water, you're not going to have toms, because you're not going to have hens, because hens have to nest on the water for the chicks. It's just that simple. They can't move a mile to water like a calf, elk, or a fawn. They just can't do it. So, got to be where the hens are to start with.
All right. Well, that is beautiful. Of course, we just barely scratched the surface of this topic, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to share your insights and participate in this conversation. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great to be involved. Thanks, Emmanuel.
All right. Yep. We'll see you both soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Nature Bound. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to purchase your copy of The 7 Principles of the Magic Rock at emmanuelrose.com or on Amazon. We thank you again for joining us today, and remember to get nature bound.